She grew up in a small town where people lived simple lives and everyone knew each other's story. Her house was tiny with old walls that carried every sound from one room to another, but it always felt warm because her family was close. Even though they didn't have much money, they always tried to stay hopeful. In that house, there was one thing she loved more than anything: an old plastic keyboard her father had brought home many years ago. It was scratched, missing a few keys, and never played the right volume, but to her, it was the most precious thing in the world. She wasn't sure how she fell in love with music. Maybe it was the way the sound made her forget the world for a moment. Maybe it was how the keys, even when broken, made her feel like she could express everything she never said out loud. When she was very young, she would sit on the floor and tap random keys, thinking she was creating magic. As she got older, she realized she wanted to do something bigger. She wanted to play the piano, not just a keyboard with fading buttons. Her school had a real piano, a big wooden one that stood in the corner of the music room like a quiet giant. Every time she passed by that room, she would stop for a second, peek through the glass, and imagine what it would feel like to sit there and play. She knew she didn't have the skills or training. She didn't have a teacher guiding her fingers or correcting her mistakes. She only had a dream and her difficult habit of practicing alone late at night. When the rest of the house was asleep, her family understood her passion. Even though they couldn't support it in the way she wished. They worked long hours to cover basic needs, so music lessons were simply impossible. Still, they never stopped her from practicing. They would see her sitting on a small stool, eyes tired but hopeful, repeating the same melody again and again until her fingers cramped. They didn't have the heart to tell her to sleep earlier, because they knew the music was the one thing that made her feel alive, but outside her home, things were different. Dreaming big wasn't something people in her town took seriously, especially from someone like her who didn't have the resources. When she shared her wish to become a real pianist someday, others didn't encourage her the way she hoped. Her classmates found it amusing. Some would smile politely, but she could feel their doubt underneath. Others would laugh openly, saying things like, "How will you play on a real stage if you can't even afford real lessons?" They didn't say it to be cruel. They simply couldn't imagine someone rising from such a simple life. The comments hurt her more than she liked to admit. She would pretend she didn't care, telling herself that every dreamer faces doubt, but deep down the words stuck to her heart like small thorns. Even some teachers doubted her. The music teacher once told her gently, "It's wonderful that you love music, but piano takes years of training. You should focus on something more practical." The teacher didn't say it to discourage her, but it still felt like a door-closing dot. Despite all of this, she never stopped practicing. Every night she would place the keyboard on a small table near the window. The light from the street lamp outside was just bright enough to help her see the keys. The rest of the house would be quiet, with only faint noises from the neighborhood. She would put her fingers on the keys and play the same pieces she learned from short videos and old recordings. She didn't understand all the technical details, but she tried to copy the sound as closely as she could. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't, but she kept going because it made her feel strong. There were days when she felt exhausted. Days when she questioned why she was trying so hard when everything seemed against her. On those days, the keyboard sounded different, almost like it was reminding her of all the things she didn't have. But then something inside her would spark again. A small voice telling her that if she stopped, she would lose the one thing that made her feel special. So she wiped her tears, stretched her fingers, and started again. Her family noticed her determination. Her father would quietly stand near the door, listening to her play. He didn't know much about music, but he knew passion when he saw it. Her mother would bring her a warm drink on some nights, patting her head gently before whispering, "Take care of your hands." Those moments gave her strength, knowing that even if the world outside didn't believe in her, at least her home did. At school, things continued to be challenging. Other students would talk about fancy music institutes, expensive lessons, and competitions they had attended since childhood. She would sit quietly, not wanting to explain that she had learned everything from a keyboard with missing keys. One day during a break, she tried asking if she could practice on the school piano, but a few students rolled their eyes. One of them said, "It's not a toy. You can't just press keys randomly." She walked away, pretending she didn't hear it, but her heart felt heavy. Still, she didn't let go of the dream of touching the real piano. Even though she couldn't practice on it, she would stand near the door of the music room after school and just watch. Sometimes the room was empty and the piano looked peaceful. Other times, a trained student was practicing and the sound would echo beautifully through the hallways. She watched their confidence and wished she could feel that. Someday, her love for music kept her going even when people doubted her. She had no fancy books, no proper lessons, no one guiding her daily practice. But she had a dream that felt bigger than her fears. She understood that greatness doesn't always come from perfect conditions. Sometimes it comes from struggle and a heart that refuses to give up. Even though she was just a girl with a broken keyboard, she believed something good could happen one day. Every night, when she looked at the stars outside her window, she felt a strange kind of comfort. It was like the sky understood her better than people did. She imagined herself standing on a stage, fingers dancing on real piano keys, creating music so beautiful that it made people forget who she was or where she came from. It was a dream she held close, even when reality said otherwise. The more she practiced, the stronger her hope became. She didn't know when or how, but she knew that one day she wanted to show the world that talent doesn't always need money or perfect tools. Sometimes it only needs patience, courage, and a heart that refuses to stop dreaming. That belief kept her going. Even when the laughter around her grew louder, she was still far from her goal, but she wasn't empty-handed. She had resilience. She had passion. And she had a story that was only just beginning. When the new school year started, something unexpected was announced during the morning assembly. A local music organization had partnered with the school to host a regional competition. It wasn't a small event. Students from different schools would gather, parents would attend, and several local musicians would sit on the judging panel. For many students, this was a big chance to show their talent. For her, it sounded like a miracle standing in front of her. She stood among the crowd, listening to the announcement with her heart beating fast. A part of her felt excited, but another part felt scared. She knew she wasn't like the trained students in her class. They had polished techniques, proper lessons, and confidence that came from years of support. She only had her broken keyboard at home and late-night practice sessions. But the idea of a real competition, a real stage, and a real piano stirred something powerful inside her. She felt like this might be her chance to prove that she wasn't dreaming without purpose. Later that day, she went to the notice board where the competition details were posted. There were requirements, rules, and a list of recommended pieces. Students around the notice board were already discussing what songs they would perform. Some were bragging about how prepared they were. Others were excitedly comparing their past performances. She stood quietly, reading every line carefully, trying to understand what she would have to face. She knew the moment she signed her name on that registration sheet, people would talk. She knew the usual whispers would get louder, but something inside her pushed her forward. She lifted the pen with a shaking hand and wrote her name. As soon as she did, a few students turned around. Surprised, one boy raised his eyebrows and whispered to his friend, "She signed up? For the piano category?" They weren't trying to be quiet. She heard every word. Another student looked at her with disbelief and asked, "Are you seriously participating? Have you ever even played a proper piano?" She wanted to answer softly, but instead she just nodded and walked away. She could feel their stares behind her, but she didn't slow down. Her decision reached her family later that evening. When she told them, her mother looked worried. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked gently. "There will be many trained students. What if you feel embarrassed?" But her father simply smiled in a quiet way, the same way he did when he wanted her to believe in herself. "If she wants to try, let her try," he said. "There's no shame in effort." Those words encouraged her, even though she still carried nervousness deep inside. She knew the competition was not just about playing music. It was about courage. She had never played in front of a big crowd before. She had never touched a grand piano for more than a minute. But she had passion, and right now, that was the only strength she could rely on. Her preparation began the next day. She asked the music teacher if she could practice on the school piano after classes. The teacher paused, unsure. "There are many students waiting for practice time," she said. "But you can come when the room is free?" It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. She accepted it with a small smile. That week, she went to the music room almost every day, standing outside patiently. Sometimes the room was full. Sometimes a group of students were practicing in turns. Occasionally the piano was free, but only for a short while. In those moments she would sit quickly, take a deep breath, and try to remember everything she had practiced at home. But the real piano felt different, bigger, heavier, louder. Its keys reacted differently to her touch. She felt like she had to learn everything again from the beginning. Some students noticed her struggling. A few tried not to laugh, but she could see it in their eyes. One girl whispered to her friend, "She doesn't even know how to place her fingers properly." Another student joked, "If she keeps practicing like this, the piano will give up on its own." She heard the comments, felt each one like a small cut inside her, but she didn't stop. She stayed focused, even when her hands trembled from nervousness. Most days, she barely got 10 minutes on the piano before someone else came in claiming their turn. But she made those 10 minutes count. She practiced with intensity, memorizing rhythms, correcting mistakes, and teaching herself how to control her movements. After school, when she went home, she continued practicing on her keyboard, even though it didn't sound the same. She believed that effort never goes to waste. No matter how small the progress felt. As the competition day got closer, the pressure around her increased. People kept reminding her, directly or indirectly, that she wasn't ready. Some teachers were concerned, some were doubtful, and many students openly questioned why she even signed up. When she walked through the hallways, she could hear their comments. "She's going to embarrass herself. She's brave. But this is too much for her. Maybe she should try something else." She pretended not to care. But late at night, when she placed her fingers on the keyboard, doubts would creep into her mind. She wondered if she really belonged in that competition. She wondered if she was chasing something too far from her reach. But then she would close her eyes, listen to the soft sounds her keyboard made, and remind herself that she wasn't doing this to prove others wrong. She was doing it to prove to herself that she could follow her passion. No matter how hard it was, during one of her short practice sessions at school, something unexpected happened. A teacher who rarely spoke to her happened to pass by the music room and paused at the door. He watched her play for a moment before saying, "Your technique is still rough, but there's emotion in your playing. Don't lose that." His words were simple, but they felt like a small spark of hope inside her. It was the first time someone outside her home acknowledged her effort without mocking her. She carried those words with her like a quiet encouragement. She continued practicing every day, even when she was tired from schoolwork. Some evenings she wanted nothing more than to rest, but she forced herself to practice because she knew passion wasn't enough. She needed discipline too. Her fingers sometimes hurt from pressing the keys for too long, and there were nights she almost fell asleep at the keyboard. But she didn't stop. She knew the competition was approaching fast, and she wanted to give her best attempt, even if it wasn't perfect. As the final week approached, the school atmosphere changed. Students were buzzing with excitement. Music could be heard from different corners of the building. Some were practicing violin pieces, some were warming up their voices, and others were rehearsing piano pieces with confidence that made her feel small. She watched them sometimes, both admiring and envying their ease. But instead of letting it discourage her, she let it motivate her. If they could work hard, she could too. The night before the submission of final preparations, she sat with her family at the dinner table. Her mother looked at her carefully and asked, "Are you scared?" For the first time, she didn't hide her feelings. She nodded slowly. Her mother reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak," she said. "It means what you're doing matters to you." Her father added, "And no matter what happens, we are proud of you." That night she practiced longer than usual. She played the same piece over and over, trying to make every note clear, every movement smooth. She imagined the audience, imagined the lights, imagined the nervousness she would feel on stage. Instead of running from that fear, she tried to prepare herself for it. She wasn't aiming for perfection. She was aiming for courage. Finally, the week ended and the competition day was only a few days away. She knew she had done everything she could with the resources she had. She wasn't the most trained performer. She didn't have the sharp confidence others carried. But she had heart. She had dedication. And she had the belief that sometimes effort shines brighter than skill. She felt scared, hopeful, anxious, determined, everything at once. But deep inside, she also felt something she hadn't felt before: readiness. Not the kind of readiness that comes from perfect practice, but the kind that comes from knowing you didn't give up. Even when everyone thought you would, she walked into the school on the final rehearsal day with a different kind of energy. The students still whispered. Some still doubted her. But now, when she heard their comments, she didn't break inside. She just smiled softly and kept walking. She knew that the real test was coming soon, and for the first time in her life, she felt brave enough to face it. The morning of the competition arrived much faster than she expected. She woke up earlier than usual, even before her alarm rang. Her room felt different that day. The air seemed heavier, like it carried the weight of every moment she had lived to reach this point. Her heart beat faster than normal, but she kept telling herself that this was just another day, another chance to grow. She sat at the edge of her bed for a few minutes, trying to calm the mix of excitement and fear inside her. Her mother entered the room, quietly, and placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect," she whispered. "Just be yourself." Those simple words gave her strength. She got ready, tied her hair neatly, and wore the cleanest outfit she had. It wasn't fancy like the clothes other performers would wear, but it was enough for her. She looked at herself in the mirror, took a deep breath, and tried to smile. Today was the day she would stand on a real stage for the first time. When she reached the school auditorium, the atmosphere was completely different from normal days. There were banners, bright lights, organized rows of chairs, and tables set up for the judges. Students from other schools also arrived, carrying their instruments or walking confidently with their music sheets. Some wore elegant clothes and had the posture of trained musicians. She watched them with quiet admiration. Their confidence made her nervous, but she reminded herself that everyone's journey was different. Inside the waiting area, students practiced their pieces softly. Some warmed up their fingers on small portable keyboards, while others whispered rehearsed melodies under their breath. She sat in a corner, holding her hands tightly to stop them from shaking. Every now and then, someone would glance at her. A few of the students from her own school whispered among themselves, clearly surprised that she actually came. One girl said loudly enough for others to hear, "I thought she would back out today." Another smirked and replied, "Let's see how long she lasts on stage." Their voices made her stomach twist, but she didn't respond. She didn't want to carry anger onto the stage. She looked at the floor, took a deep breath, and reminded herself why she was here. She wasn't here to compete with others. She wasn't here to prove anything to those who doubted her. She was here because music meant something to her, something deep, something real. When the announcer finally called her group's name, her throat went dry. She followed the other participants backstage. Each student would perform one by one. She watched one student before her step onto the stage, bow politely, and play a smooth, polished piece. The audience clapped loudly. Another student followed, with confident steps and perfect posture. Every note they played sounded practiced, mature, and clean. She listened carefully, admiring their skill, but also feeling smaller each minute. Her turn was getting closer. Her palms started to sweat, and her heart felt like it was trying to escape her chest. She wiped her hands on her clothes and closed her eyes for a moment. She imagined herself sitting in her room, practicing late at night while the world slept. She imagined the soft glow of the street lamp outside her window, the quiet of the house, the warmth of her family's silent support. Those memories made her heartbeat slow down just a little. When the announcer finally said her name, she froze for a second. It felt unreal. But the stage assistant gently touched her arm. giving her a small nod to walk forward. She forced her legs to move. Each step toward the piano felt heavy, but she reached the center of the stage eventually. The bright lights hit her face, making it hard to see anyone clearly. She could only see blurry outlines of the audience teachers, parents, judges, and students watching her every move. Somewhere in the crowd, she heard a few chuckles. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make her feel exposed. A few people whispered, surprised that she dared to come on stage. She could sense the doubt floating around the room like a cloud. For a moment, she felt like turning around and running off the stage. Her legs felt weak, her hands cold, and her throat tight. She wondered if she had made a huge mistake, but then she looked at the piano. The large, polished instrument stood in front of her like a silent friend waiting to be heard. She had dreamed of this moment for years. She had imagined touching real piano keys, letting her emotions flow through the music, and letting the world feel what she felt. She reminded herself that even if she failed today, she would still be proud for trying. That simple thought gave her enough courage to take another step. She sat down on the piano bench, her hands trembling slightly. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the cold but smooth surface under her touch. She closed her eyes for a second and took a slow breath. For that brief moment, the entire world faded away. She wasn't in a competition anymore. She wasn't surrounded by people waiting to judge her. She was back at home, sitting near her window with her old keyboard, letting her heart guide her hands. As soon as she played the first note, something inside her shifted. The sound was richer than anything her keyboard had ever produced. It filled the hall in a way she had never experienced before. Her fear slowly melted as she played the next few notes. She went slow at first, trying to adjust to the sensitivity of the piano. But with each passing second, she felt more sure, more connected to the music she had practiced for so long. The audience, which had been restless a moment ago, started to quiet down. People leaned forward, trying to understand what they were hearing. Her playing wasn't perfect. It didn't have the sharp precision of trained performers, but there was something else in her music emotion. It felt raw, honest, and filled with a story no one had heard before. She wasn't just playing notes. She was sharing her journey, her struggles, her late-night practice sessions, and her unspoken feelings. Every touch of the key carried her heart. As the piece continued, she lost herself completely in the melody. She forgot about the whispers, the doubts, the laughter she had faced. She forgot about the voices telling her she wasn't good enough. In that moment, nothing existed except her and the piano. She let her emotions guide her fingers, sometimes soft like a quiet memory, sometimes stronger like a burst of bravery. The judges exchanged glances, not because her performance was technically flawless, but because they felt something unusual in her music, something sincere, something real. Even the students who doubted her earlier sat silently, unable to look away. The same students who whispered before now listened with wide eyes, wondering how someone they underestimated could create something so moving. Near the end of the piece, her hands moved with a confidence she didn't know she had. The music grew deeper, and the hall grew even more silent. When she played the final note, it echoed gently through the room before fading into complete stillness. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, meaningful, filled with emotions that didn't need words. She lifted her hands from the keys slowly, not believing what had just happened. For a moment, no one moved. No one whispered. No one laughed. The entire audience sat frozen, stunned by the raw beauty of what they had heard. She finally looked up and saw faces that weren't mocking her anymore. They were mesmerized, surprised, and almost in disbelief. In that moment, she felt something she had never felt before, the power of being truly seen. Her fear melted away completely. She had done what she came to do. She had played from her heart, and that was enough. For a few seconds after her final note faded, the hall remained completely silent. She sat there on the piano bench, unsure if she should stand or wait, unsure if she had done something wrong or if the audience simply didn't know how to react. Her hands were still slightly shaking, and she could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She had never seen so many faces focused on her at the same time. It felt unreal, almost like a dream she had entered without warning. Then, suddenly, someone clapped. Just one person at first. She couldn't see who it was because of the bright stage lights. But that single clap broke the stillness in the room. After that, another person clapped. Then another. And within seconds, the entire hall erupted into applause so loud and full that it made her feel breathless. She looked around, trying to understand if this was truly happening. The very people who had doubted her, the very students who whispered about her, were now sitting upright with expressions she had never seen on their faces: shock, respect, and something she never expected, admiration. She stood slowly and gave a small, shy bow. The applause continued, growing even louder. Some people even stood up, clapping with wide smiles. She could not believe it. She had imagined many possible outcomes before stepping onto that stage. Maybe she would play well. Maybe she would make a mistake. Maybe the audience would feel bored. But she never imagined that the hall would be filled with this kind of powerful silence, followed by enthusiastic applause. She never imagined that her music, coming from years of quiet practice on a broken keyboard, could touch so many people. As she walked backstage, she tried to hide her trembling hands. She wasn't shaking out of fear anymore. It was pure emotion. She felt overwhelmed in the best way. Backstage, some of the participants who had performed earlier looked at her with widened eyes. They didn't say anything, but their expressions said enough. They had heard her performance. They had felt something in her music too. A few minutes later, her music teacher approached her. The teacher's face, usually calm and neutral, carried an expression of genuine surprise mixed with pride. She placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said softly, "I didn't expect that. But I am truly proud of you." Hearing this from someone who once doubted her made her eyes fill with tears. She quickly wiped them away, trying not to appear too emotional. But the teacher simply nodded knowingly. Soon after, some of her classmates approached her hesitantly. These were the same students who had laughed at her dreams, whispered behind her back, and assumed she would embarrass herself. They looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. One finally managed to speak. "Your performance was different," he said awkwardly. "It was really beautiful." She didn't know how to respond. She simply smiled politely and said, "Thank you." It wasn't a big response, but it carried a quiet strength she hadn't felt before. As the event continued, she watched the rest of the performances, but her mind kept replaying the moment she stepped on stage. She still couldn't fully process it. She had gone up there with fear, with shaking hands, carrying years of doubt. Yet something powerful happened when she touched the piano. She found confidence she never knew she had. She found her voice through music. And the audience felt it too. When the judges finally came back with the results, everyone gathered in the hall again. Students were whispering nervously, hoping their names would be called. She didn't expect to win anything. She wasn't even thinking about awards. Just performing on that stage was already a victory she had never imagined. She stood quietly among the other participants, waiting for the announcements. The judges praised different performers for their technique, skill, and control. Then the head judge mentioned something unexpected. "Today," he said, "we witnessed many talented players. But there was one student whose performance came from a place of pure emotion. It may not have been technically perfect, but it touched the heart in a way only true passion can." She felt her heart skip a beat. She didn't dare think they were talking about her, the judge continued. "This student reminded us that music is not only about ability, it's about soul." Her breath caught in her throat. Then the judge said her name. She froze. She didn't even realize she was holding her breath until the students around her lightly pushed her forward, telling her to go receive the Special Recognition Award. It wasn't first place, it wasn't second place, it was something different, something more personal. An award for expression. An award for heart. The entire hall clapped again, and this time she didn't feel small or scared. She walked to the stage with steady steps, feeling stronger than she ever had. When she received the certificate, the judge leaned closer and said, "Don't stop playing. You have something special." His words echoed in her ears long after she left the stage. She held the certificate tightly, feeling as though it weighed more than paper. It held her journey, her struggles, her sleepless nights, her hope. After the event ended, her family met her outside the auditorium. The moment her mother saw her, she pulled her into a warm, tight hug. "I knew you could do it," her mother whispered with a trembling voice. Her father smiled proudly, his eyes shining with emotion he tried to hide. "You made us proud today," he said quietly. "Not because of the award, but because you didn't give up." Hearing those words made her feel more grateful than anything else. She realized then that all the practice she had done, all the doubt she had fought, all the tears she had wiped quietly, it was all worth it. That night, when she returned home, she placed her certificate on the small table next to her old keyboard. She sat down on the stool where she had practiced for so many years. The keyboard still had missing keys, still made uneven sounds, still looked worn out. But today it felt different. Today it wasn't just a broken instrument. It was a symbol of her journey, a reminder that even with limited resources, she had managed to create something meaningful. She touched the keys gently and played a slow, soft melody. She didn't practice. She simply let her fingers move freely. It wasn't a performance and no one was watching. This was a quiet moment just for herself. She closed her eyes and remembered the bright stage lights, the applause, the silence that came before it. The way she felt her heart pour out through her music, she realized something important that night. Her dream wasn't impossible. It wasn't silly or unreachable. She had thought for years that she needed perfect conditions, perfect training, perfect tools to succeed. But today proved that passion can shine even through imperfect things. It showed her that the world doesn't decide her worth, her heart does. The next day at school, everything felt different. Students looked at her with new respect. Some even approached her for advice on their music pieces. Teachers treated her differently too, not with pity, but with recognition. The same music teacher who once doubted her now offered her extra practice time on the school piano. She accepted it with gratitude, knowing she would use every moment wisely. She knew her journey wasn't over. This was only the beginning. She had a long way to go, many things to learn, many skills to improve. But now she believed she could grow. She believed she could reach further than she had ever imagined. And most importantly, she believed in herself. Every dreamer needs one moment that changes everything. This performance was hers. It didn't make her famous. It didn't make her instantly skilled. But it made her brave. It made her confident. It made her understand that the world becomes silent when passion speaks. And with that understanding in her heart, she knew she would keep playing for herself, for her dreams, for the music that lived inside her,